Okay, Elf, say Bismillah. Let's go.
Yeah, okay. Bismillah. Uh, Welcome, everyone, family, friends, comrades. Thank you for joining us in this memorial service for our good comrade, Yusuf Bhamjee. What I do want to do is please request that we just have a moment silent to start the meeting. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it. So to start by saying, on behalf of, I'm sure all of us here, we'd like to sympathize with the family, with his close friends and comrades, and wish them strength in this journey of being able to cope with the loss of such an important person. I want to especially say that we held discussion with Suhaifa, and I'm so pleased that she's here and that she will make an input as well. Our purpose today is to remember a true icon, someone who until recently, very recently, walked around with us, participated in the struggle. More recently, as people would know, Yusuf was very much part of trying to revive activism and trying to revive the process of community organization. So, throughout his life, he joined so many of the comrades that are present here today in fighting for a non racial future, in fighting for good government, and in fighting to ensure uh, that the benefits of democracy are experienced by everyone and not just the rich. He was truly a person who had a very wide range of interests and led a full life. He was a family man, firstly. He was an academic. He was involved in sports. He was an activist. He was a mayor. He was a member of parliament. He led a full life. And that characterizes a lot of the activists of that period who just weren't activists, but were broader in society than just that. So thank you all for being here. Um, I just want to say, before we start the house rules, please, we want to keep this short. We'd appreciate all the speakers keeping to the time limit as agreed. And if you don't, Karuna will act, and she's dangerous. But anyhow, so I'm hoping that we could finish latest by 8:30. I think that's what we scheduled. And the program really would be a set of speakers. And the speakers then, after the speakers will follow for about 20, 30 minutes, in just giving people an opportunity from the floor to say anything they would prefer to about Yusuf, to recall a memory, or to make any comment that they would like to make about Yusuf. Now, I think with that, we can call the first speaker if people are okay. And if I can please call Comrade Ila. I'm not going to be making extensive or elaborate introductions to each one. That normally takes a lot of time. People know each other quite well over here. So I would like to hand over to Comrade Ila to make her input initially. Thank you.
Thank you, Alf. Thanks for inviting me to this memorial. And I just want to start off by expressing my solidarity with the family of Yusuf Bhamjee and on the said occasion, and express my deepest condolences with them. Indeed, it was extremely sad to hear of the passing of this humble giant, loved by the community for his ever willingness to be of help. The stories of his generosity and his work as educator, conscientizer, and mobilizer were revealed by so many mourners who attended his funeral. He never spoke about it, but I got to know from these stories that he was indeed a pillar of strength to so many people who came to him with their problems. The same spirit of empathy drove him to commit fully to the struggle against apartheid. I got to know Yusuf during the 70s after the revival of the NIC. He played a pivotal role in the struggle, especially in Pietermaritzburg. He helped mobilize not only the community of Pietermaritzburg, but also academics and students. And also he played a pivotal role in the revival of the NIC in the 70s. He was not only a committed activist, but applied his academic knowledge to help ensure that our strategies were based on knowledge and were scientifically conceptualized. His background in social research and the information that he and his team were able to acquire assisted activists in understanding and planning the work of protest against the unjust apartheid system. It is important to note that Yusuf was one of those unique individuals who did not define the other in terms of race, color, class, religion, gender, or any other socially created divisions. For him, a person was a person, full stop. This characteristic led him to both understand the South African situation from a holistic perspective and enabled him to make friends across all these divisions and work effectively with diverse groups for the betterment of humankind. He was deeply concerned about the exploitation and divisions created by apartheid and worked hard, firstly, to overthrow apartheid through the work in NIC and UDF and through the civic organization that he helped to form in Pietermaritzburg. I believe he also did a lot of work overseas in mobilizing support against apartheid amongst the communities in the UK. Secondly, through his constant vigilance post-apartheid on the nature of governance and how best services can be delivered to the community, he was able to improve the service delivery in the region under his control as mayor. This was so well illustrated during his term as mayor and as part of the provincial and national legislature. His personality was a breath of fresh air in our corruption-riddled society. His integrity and honesty were unquestionable. His lifestyle, simple, and no matter what position he held, his approach to people was the same, warm, sincere, and dignified. I cannot imagine Yusuf walking around with a troop of security around him. They may be around because of his position, but were never flouted as ushers of some great personality. Such was his humility and community rootedness. He believed in and lived the values of the movement. A devoted family man, as Alpha said, he also was devoted to the community and to his principles. He was able to mobilize people, get people to commit to the struggle through education and understanding of the issues and work with youth. He won over people through patient hearing and understanding of their difficulties. He developed deep insight into the needs of the community and was then able to plan appropriately to meet the felt needs of the community. This methodical approach helped in realizing the turnaround in the municipal services in his area during his time as mayor. South Africa has lost another pillar of strength, a warm, humble, committed comrade. Rest in peace, Comrade Yusuf, for your spirit and your legacy will continue to inspire many comrades for generations to come. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Comrade Ilan. Much appreciated. I do know that Comrade Yusuf was very dedicated to a non-racial future and to build bridges among the different people of the country. Although he was heavily criticized, he continued to be a flag bearer for non-racialism. Ilan, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next speaker, please, if we can have Comrade Lechisa Sinodi. Lech, we appreciate your presence over here today and welcome you and look forward to listening to you. Thanks, Lech.
Thank you very much, Comrade Alf. And I do wish to thank the organizers of this significant farewell to one of our best comrades, one of our best cadres. It is to his wife and children and the rest of his family who face the new year without the pillar of strength of their loved one. It is for this reason that we should not allow his spear, so to speak, to fall on the ground. We should pick it up with the passion and strength with which he fought the battles he was involved in. He was a dedicated cadre, an experienced activist, an exemplary public representative. We would have, and he would have been absolutely saddened, given this description of him, by the by the post-election result, especially in KZN. His death is particularly challenging for its timing and the quality of cadre that he represented. We will miss him for that reason, given what we are confronted with. He goes with his integrity intact. The stench of corruption and maladministration never really touched him at all. We owe it to his wife and daughters and the children generally to ensure that we redouble our efforts in the campaign against gender-based violence and femicide, that we must reclaim our streets and our neighborhoods from criminals who spread fear and terror, including in our homes. Yusuf was one who was absolutely dedicated, and his work in communities, in sports, in politics, and in leadership responsibilities inside government, as exemplified even inside SALGA as a member there, were absolutely what he has left us to follow. It is the pursuit of academic goals that he particularly showed and emphasized the necessity for such education for cadres. And he did this demonstrating the sacrifice that is necessary and always important as an ingredient in support for the work he was doing amongst the working class, but most importantly, that education is a powerful instrument for sustainable livelihood, as well as in workplaces that requires capacity. It was for that reason that Che Guevara perhaps said the first duty of a cadre is to educate himself or herself. Yusuf leaves us the weaker, not only in KZN, but in the entire country, given the quality of man he was. And Comrade Ila illustrates the point we are making about his commitment, his humble and always behind the scenes work that he did with passion and with dedication. That we have issues of challenges coming from the conferences we have had in the recent past, including the 113th anniversary of the African National Congress, are important occasions to use as an opportunity to reflect on how we can remember Yusuf in the work we continue to do in his absence. We will mourn him for a long period of time, given the quality of his input. He came out of a snowball effect that grew from Morogoro in Tanzania to hit the shores of our country in a powerful manner that ensured across the civics, politics, and sports, as I said, he made his mark, and we will remember him for the quality of work he did and the ethical conduct and integrity with which he left us. That's one thing that we will not forget. Thank you very much, Comrade Alf.
Comrade Nchisa, thank you. I must say you're always available to support work that is being done, and we appreciate that. But I suppose all of us would realize, especially yourself as the senior comrade, Lech, that somewhere, somehow, we've got to ensure that the beliefs, the values that Comrade Yusuf Bhamjee stood for is something that we need to institutionalize within our movement, and part of the renewal to make sure that that happens. Thank you, Comrade Lech. I'd like to call upon Yunus Karim, a lifelong friend and comrade. Earlier this week, I had a chat to Yunus, and even last week, and he was saying some very interesting things about Comrade Yusuf. So over to you, Comrade Yunus.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. Now, those people here who think they know me won't believe that I will finish in 10 minutes. So, and to make your life easier, I'll put my timer on for 9 minutes. So I remind myself I must come to a halt within 30 seconds. You see, Chairperson, there's a speaker that's preceded me, and it's not a female. When you've been in a certain institution for 30 years, and that person and the likes of him will say, order, your time is up. Sometimes even in 3 minutes, when you have a declaration that only allows for that, you get very sobered. So you can be assured that I shall finish on time. I want to say at the outset that it's a sad occasion, certainly. And as with most activists, it's also an occasion to remember there's something about remembering their life that should be uplifting, not depressing us, as we all have to pass on. And Yusuf had formidable health challenges, and it's remarkable that he had such a will and a stamina that he was with us until Friday the 3rd. Now, Yusuf has made a major contribution, as is covered by the previous speakers, yourself, Chairperson, and in many publications where tributes have been paid to him. And he made his contribution, of course, in his own right. But to fully get a sense of him, one also has to understand the family that he came from, the well-known Bhamjee family. They're a very hospitable, socially responsible family, and very well known was the Bhamjee shoe store. In fact, at a time, it was probably the only shoe store in the city. It was located at the bottom end of Church Street, the Indian business sector. Established in 1958, I think, when the family came from Walberitstad, where our Yusuf was born, and he would have turned 75 on the 10th of January this year. Now, apart from Indians going to buy the shoes there, white people looking for cheaper shoes were happy to come down to the bottom end of that Church Street, which was Indian only, because they could get cheaper shoes, and also because they could get sizes that weren't available at the established white shoe shops. And later, with mobility, Africans also joined the shoe shop. And the entire family was involved in the shop. And looming over them was the matriarch, if you like, Yusuf Bhamjee, Yusuf's mother. And she was somebody who had this attitude that your customers are part of your family. And she was one who often, for poor people who couldn't afford it, dispensed with the full charge for the shoe. And so they became very well established. But of course, with the changes in the economy and in the footwear sectors, I wanted to say that besides Yusuf, Hanif was very active. He's anti-apartheid Cardiff chairperson. Ismail Bhamjee, very active in sport. And then the fourth sibling, all brothers, Shabir, was very involved in the business and made space, if you like, for the other three siblings to get very involved. Now, Yusuf is most of all the always there politician, there for his constituents, who flocked to his constituency office that he and Elliot and Gebo ran for many years until the latter passed away. And, I think that's the hallmark of a good politician. You see, you can pass laws and make hot speeches in parliament, but ultimately, what's a good politician, if not the person who's in parliament, the lights have come back, who actually serves constituents, because that's ultimately what we're meant to do. Now, I met him in June 1983 when he returned from his Irish studies, and we became members of the development studies group. And then later I went into sociology, into politics. Ever resourceful, he turned up once at our office there in the DSRG with a huge fridge, these very old fridges, because he had this idea that we couldn't always go around the corner to go and get cold drinks and so on. But of course, I don't know where you got that fridge from. There was no discussion with me. It was just plonked right behind my chair, very huge one. It was looming over my desk. And of course, after 3 or 4 weeks, it conked out. And he was furious about it. But of course, ever resourceful, as I said, he was about to give up on it. So for many years later, it stayed there, this huge looming fridge. And guess what? He used it for a filing system, which he could make no sense of because it was...
I'll ask you to come in, Roshan Jena, and make an input. You've been particularly close to him in this last period, and maybe that will throw some light in terms of your understanding of the comrade. Please, Roshan.
Okay, hi. I think this last couple of months have been an amazing. It was, in many ways, discovering the man behind the politician. Because, Yusuf was at pains to explain to me that factionalism and the toxicity that existed in politics was demeaning not only to humans and to human relationships, but it has destroyed the ANC, it has destroyed the alliance, and in some ways it has started to destroy the country. And we also evidence of this. So we know of the kind of background that exists in politics. But beneath this giant that everyone respected in politics, especially as a district mayor that had 5 clean audits in a row, I found an amazing soul. And as a friend, he epitomized something very special that is possibly absent in the new breed of leadership. He was very old school in that way, that he valued family, he valued friends, he valued even the comrades and the youth that worked with him. And I must say that he always challenged me to be the best that I can be. And I must also admit that at some stage, especially during the July unrest and in the formation of the Peace and Development Forum after the July violence in our area, and in our ward in particular, Yusuf and I had a lot of run-ins. And those run-ins were in a way operational, so to say. But we had both come to a realization how similar we were when it came to our stubbornness. And what had happened is that he had invited me for coffee, and that coffee just continued almost every week. And in the last 2 months, maybe every second day. And what we had started was a process of And I called it Conversations with Yusuf. And we were keen on documenting some of our thoughts and our, and how we view things. And because I've been strong on the formation of civil society, and I've always challenged Yusuf that this democratic centralism and the way there's this disconnect between government and the people. And Yusuf continuously told me, you think that building civil society is your real task. He says, your task is to deepen democracy. And he says, sometimes when you remove the center, you don't actually know what you are asking for. So we had interesting discussions about politics, and he forced me to go and read Gramsci, and then he would question me like a school teacher when we met again about what was in the prison notebooks that Gramsci wrote whilst he was in prison. And he challenged so many things about my understanding about civil society, about my understanding about politics, and my understanding even about our friendship. And there was a time, at one time, Yusuf had this tendency where he could really want to control everything. And I told him once that, Comrade Yusuf, you are ideologically corrupt. And he was never as angry. I've never seen him as angry as he was when I told him that. And we unpacked this. We unpacked it, and he insisted on unpacking it. And there's so much that I learned in the process, right? And I must say that the humanity in him and what he epitomized when it comes to a somewhat philosophical concept of love, but in him it was very real, but he always remained this fighter. I recall right towards the end, we at the Nelson Mandela capture site, and he gave a speech at the opening of the museum for the Naidu family, Prema Naidu's family. And I took him, and after we went home, and he was really battling with his breathing. And, I was worried and I was concerned, and we had to relax in the car, put on the aircon and whatever else. And then when we reached his home, now, if you know his home, there's stairs that he needs to go to his house. And I wanted to help him. I got off the car to help him, and he swore me. He says, I must get back to the car. He can manage. Because that was Yusuf. He had the strength, and he wanted to be in control, even of his health when it was failing. And I stood at the bottom, and I remember he reached the door, and then he turned around, and he saw me still standing there, and he gestured with his hand like I must go away. So anyway, I left. Next day he called, and we had coffee again. And then he says, I'm not sure how much time I have left. And for me, that moment was a breaking moment, because I realized something. We take so much for granted. We take life for granted. We take the people in our lives for granted. We take what we share with people for granted, only to find one day we will wake up and somebody's not there. So just in coming to a conclusion of what I'm saying, I don't want to concentrate on the political side of it, because he was so amazing as a politician, as a guy that really went and started doing political education classes for the youth, the guy who spoke at length based on his experience. But I just want to cover, in concluding what I'm saying, that Yusuf, as a friend, I've been through some difficult times after COVID with my business of 30, 40 years. And Yusuf has stood by me in a manner that I never expected for him to do so. Yusuf turned, when I look at the ups and downs and how we argued politically, and then I was reminded when Shakespeare wrote in Let Me Not Into the Marriage of Two Minds, and he said, love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, no bends with the remover to remove. It's a never fixed mark that rides on tempests and is never shaken. And I'm also reminded when Mikhail Naomi wrote that we live that we may learn to love, we love that we may learn to live, no other lesson is required of man. And I found in the last 2 months, he encapsulated this so perfectly, because he could absorb anything you tell him. And at one stage, I teased him and I said, you like SpongeBob, you could just, like a sponge, you can absorb things. And he had that patience, unbelievable patience. And then we laughed and we said, no, it's Spun Joe, because often he's referred to as Joe. But there was something magical about the look in his face as he sat and he spoke. It was like light. My friends, especially my Muslim friends, often refer to it as the nur. And it was so much in evidence, although there was sickness, although sometimes he was battling with his breathing. I think he wanted to reach out to a lot of people. Nobody expects, we know when somebody is ill, but nobody expects the inevitable to happen. And when it happens, although we shouldn't be as shocked as we are, but it was very, very surprising to hear that we had lost Yusuf. And for me, it's not losing the political leader of our times. It's the loss of our friend. And as much as I say, and whisper it, as Comrade Siva wrote in his article, you whisper Hamba Gashle Mkonto. But from my wife and myself, we say goodbye to Uncle Yusuf. We say goodbye to a friend who taught us, as we are approaching our 60s, he taught us that love is very real. Love is very possible in this world. And he'll forever be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan. I hope people can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thanks, Roshan. Comrade Roshan, I just want to say thank you very much for that, because for sharing that. That was very warm, very kind, very moving. We appreciate that. I just want to say that the experiences you probably had with Comrade Yusuf is going to be something that you'll always analyze for the rest of your life. And it's a special thing. But what is most special about it, and I know Comrade Yusuf is the subject of today, but what is also very special about it is this, that, life chooses certain comrades, certain special people to walk the last mile with fellow travelers. And you've had the opportunity to do that. Thank you. And I hope you can maybe commit it to writing so that you can share those experiences more fully with all of us. Roshan, thank you. I think you've also laid a very good basis for an input that will now be made by Dr. Suhaifa Bhamjee, obviously, Yusuf's daughter. We look forward to your presentation, and thank you for being with us, Suhaifa. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you all. And I'm quite happy just to be called Suhaifa. I think this has been in my life. It's, how do I, a lot has been said about Daddy as a politician, Daddy as an activist, and Daddy as a friend. But to talk now on behalf of my sister and I, my cousins, and our extended family, about Daddy the man and the person he was to us, is something something that I never thought I would have to do. Yes, I know that ends come and ends must come. But for me, certainly for all of us, there's still so much to have got from Daddy. There's still so much that I feel the gaps can still be filled. So you will beg me a little indulgence if I lose my train of thought or if I waffle on, because while I did try to put my thoughts to paper, it has not quite happened the way I suppose it should have. So to talk about Daddy is pretty much impossible to do without talking about Mommy. And our mother was truly the love of my father's life. And when she passed, a very big part of my father passed with her at that stage. And he bore his sorrow and he bore our sorrow, and he carried it with him, trying to make this journey of life and love a little more doable and a lot less fearful. And I don't know where he or how he managed to find the strength to do that and be that for us. We're so consumed in our own sadness that for a long time it was difficult for us to truly grasp and appreciate his. And when I say it's difficult to talk about daddy without talking about mommy, and that's because they really were quite a pair. And if you think of hands in gloves, they were the perfect fit for each other. And maybe we idolize our parents, but it really was that. There was always playful banter, and there was always jokes, mostly at daddy's expense, from mommy and from us. You know, I remember when daddy had, he got his first cell phone, and it rang. And whenever his phone rang, he would just stand rooted to the spot and he wouldn't move. And we'd wait very patiently for him to finish his conversation. And mommy turned to us and said, you know, it's called a mobile because you're supposed to be able to walk around with it and be mobile with it. And poor daddy certainly didn't have a comeback for that. He just stuck his tongue out a bit and then said, oh, darling, and then took mommy by the hand and we carried on with our day. And so even growing up as cousins and in that setting, I think we learned how to joke with each other. We learned how to love each other. And, you know, I gave a lot of jibes and jabs, but Samira and Daddy didn't miss the opportunity to give it back to me. And I do remember they were sitting in the kitchen. No, I don't even know what they were doing because I sort of stumbled in and was picking up stompies. But they were discussing how to spell a particular word. And because I'd only heard like part of the conversation, I started on with I before E except after C. And the two of them just silently, very quietly, let me carry on for a while. And then they both looked at each other, smirked, and Samira turned to me, but that word doesn't even have an I. And so I had to suck it up and move on and move forward. And there were very many incidents like that that filled our days with just banter and happiness. If I have to think of, you know, Uncle Yunus said that Daddy was the always there politician. And I'd have to say that Daddy was the always there daddy. One of the very vivid pictures in my mind is him running when I was in class 1, running in the parents' race at Islamia Primary School for our sports day. You know, giving it his all, not least because of his stories to us all the time of what a good athlete he was. But I think also just because he was daddy and he was there and he had to show up for us. I think we also didn't quite, certainly we were very young when it came to in the 1980s and the early 90s, when mommy and daddy certainly came back from Ireland where they were studying. and came to South Africa pretty much in the thick of apartheid. And we'd always been taken along as a group, cousins, etc., to rallies, to vigils, to meetings. And I have to say that didn't quite cotton on then that that's what those were. I mean, for me, for all of us, it was, oh, cool, we get to spend the day with Joe and his friends. We get to go out. But when it started making some sort of inkling for me was in around 1986. We were still living in our communal home with my grandmother, my uncle Ismail, their children, and mommy was working in Edendale, not Edendale, King Edward Hospital at the time. And because I was pretty much my daddy's shadow and clung to him like glue, I used to, bunk with daddy. But on that night, the security police came in and they took my daddy away from me. I still didn't quite understand it because Auntie Nasima and Uncle Ismail, very gentle as always, bundled me up, took me to their room and shushed me to sleep. And the gravity of it didn't hit me until mommy came home from King Edward that night, and the look on her face is pretty much what told me that something was not quite right. And, I never had the courage to ask my dad what happened when he was in detention for that time. And he certainly didn't raise it with me directly until just a few years ago when I felt I had the courage to ask him. And I relayed to him what I remembered of that night. And when he came back and was very unshaven and things. And all he really told me was that he was in solitary confinement. I did ask him, like, well, what happens in solitary confinement? And he says, like, it's very lonely, obviously. And, the only thing they gave him to read or allowed him was the Quran, because all prisoners were allowed some sort of religious text material, and that's what he had. I did press him for more details, but he just wouldn't let me have them. He'd gotten quite quiet. And I think even then, even as we got older, he was still trying to protect us from certain harshities. And he didn't want us to quite know the type of burden he bore. On a lighter note, but still struggle worthy, I think also in the 80s, I remember there was a Simba chips boycott. And there I am with pocket money, standing at the school tuck shop and turning to my friends and saying, oh, my daddy says I'm not allowed to eat Simba chips. So for me, I only realized the struggle after much later, but at that point, the struggle felt like quite a struggle because we weren't allowed to eat Simba chips. And those are the kind of things that stick with us. I think for us, a lot of daddy loved food. He loved cooking. He loved being around people. And very many of our memories growing up were centered around food. Whether it was when he came back from a very late trip to Durban, came back to Bayat Road late with prawns from, I think the restaurant was called Seabell at the time. And he brought enough for all of us to share around that big supper table. Or whether it was impromptu picnics at Alexandra Park, or whether it was him cooking. And the cooking always ended up with the kitchen looking like a bomb blast, but the product afterwards was always something. And I do regret not wanting to learn how to make biryani from him, because I do remember him saying, come now, it's time to teach you biryani. And I, like, in a fluff, no, that means you want me to get married. And so I I just never learned how to make biryani. But he was trying with his grandchildren to pass that recipe on. There's other parts of Daddy that come out through Mummy. And I remember when Mummy made the decision to move into private practice and set up her own surgery, Daddy was the receptionist. Daddy answered calls. Daddy, welcomed the patients, and he was a receptionist for my mom for a long time. And that's kind of a weird thing to see, where a man is answering calls and doing patients at a gynae's office. But yeah, that was Daddy. He never shied away from anything. He was always there, and even as we got older, and even though as I got older, our relationship evolved. I mean, it certainly had to after Mummy's passing, certainly had to. And I had to learn how to talk to Daddy, because I think in hindsight now, I talk to Daddy via my Mummy. I mean, Daddy always understood us. I don't think we quite knew how to communicate with him. So he was very, very patient with me, very, very patient with all of us as we learned how to speak again. And that is definitely something. Look, I did have some flaming arguments with my dad. I think we all did as cousins and Samira as well. But the very beautiful thing about that was that it wasn't taken to heart. And we could come back and we could bounce back. So he was very, very generous in that respect. I think that's just love, isn't it? That really is just love. I'm just trying to. There's much yet to be said, and there are very many memories that as we sit together and talk with people and we start to think about recounting, I think we start to realize that Daddy was Daddy. I don't know him or want any other way. I mean, I understand him as a politician, formidable, and him with his writing his speeches and us trying to type from his handwriting, and it was quite a something. And I should be the last one to talk about handwriting, because my handwriting is completely atrocious. But there are very many things that we learned from Daddy and Mommy as children. Magic words, the power of please, thank you, and I'm sorry, and that must be meant. And he was very strong about passing that on to his grandchildren and his nieces and nephews. Magic words were very, very important. Daddy was very proud of his name, Yusuf, and he never missed the opportunity to tell us and remind us or anyone that his name meant handsome. And we'd heard it enough times, and he said it loud enough. And I remember also my mommy would just roll her eyes, and then he'd say it again louder, just so that she could hear it again, to remind her that he was actually handsome. I think we knew that. I think as a daughter, particularly with my face, you look exactly like your dad. I don't think you want to know that you're a handsome girl, but so be it. That is what it was. Here's a little bit about the politics as well. To say that Daddy was with the ANC and ANC was Daddy is quite true. And to the point where, there's always ANC flags up at home and wherever he could have them. And I remember fetching Seth from school one day. He was still very little. And we're driving home and there were election posters up everywhere. And he pointed out the window and he says, "That's Nana's team." I said, "Yes, that's Nana's team." So yeah, I think that stays with us and will stay with us. I'm going to try and wrap up now because yeah. So Daddy left I think bits and pieces of himself with everyone. And in the sense that there's a mark and there's a memory, and there's a joke and there's an argument that we can all definitely think about and remember in very many different ways, and at different stages of his life and different stages of our own. And so I just think that we ran out of time with Daddy. We certainly ran out of time with Daddy, and none of us were ready. And so I'd just like to leave a quote. That's a Hindi quote. Abhi na jao chorkar ke dil abhi bara nahi. And yes, our hearts are not full. Our hearts are not full, and we were not ready. So thank you all for listening to me ramble on about our father. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can say right now. Thank you all.
Suhaifa, thank you very, very much. It was so interesting hearing him, hearing the side of him, being at home, being the dad, etc. You know, often we know comrades from a distance. We don't know exactly what they are like inside in their homes, in the relationship with the close and loved ones. So that was very useful. And it only emphasizes to us the powerful person that Comrade Yusuf was. I just want to say that your journey is going to be a difficult one, as you well know. And the only solution to the grief that you're going to experience is the one that you develop for yourself. There is no other solution to be able to do that. I wish you well on that journey. Thanks, Suhaifa. So now we come to the last concluding input before we have an open session. And Comrade Ismail Wadi, who worked with him politically as well, is going to make that input. Comrade Wadi, thank you for being with us. And please continue with the input. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elf, and good evening and salam alaikum to everybody. I'm really humbled that I was asked to speak on behalf of the Congress from the Transvaal Indian Congress and the broader Congress movement in Gauteng and Johannesburg areas. So in behalf of all of us, our sincerest condolences to Samira, Suhaifa, Salim, and the family, the grandchildren, and the extended family of Yusuf. I got to know, I was aware of Yusuf before he got to parliament. I knew him as an NIC activist, ANC activist in Pietermaritzburg. But it's really in parliament that I got to know him, on a more intimate basis, more comradely basis, because of the nature of our work. Yusuf was always soft-spoken, unassuming, humble, kindness, kind-heartedness, generosity, humility, and hard work. This guy, the discipline, the level of political discipline, and the sincerity and the passion with which he worked. I think those are sterling qualities that might be lacking in some of the younger leaders that we see around us, both in the Congress movement, but also in other political formations. Yusuf, took his work extremely seriously, totally dedicated to his work. And if he took to you as a friend, and you knew from the word go that this would be a lasting and a permanent friendship and comradeship with Yusuf. That's just the type of person he was. I think others have alluded to, he had a stubborn streak in him, sometimes very, very stubborn and very strong-willed about some of his ideas. but then that's what he stood for, that's what he believed in. And sometimes you need that kind of a person also. We'll call it in our language some amount of backbone. So you stick to your position, even if if you think unless you are convinced otherwise. In Parliament, Yusuf was highly disciplined, very serious about his work, thorough preparations. If I remember correctly, he sat on the Finance Committee, which is quite an important committee, thorough preparations for all portfolio committee meetings. And, recently I saw on social media a poster which said 12 MPs of Parliament attended 80% of meetings. And it was like a matter of pride for them and I suppose for their parties. But that's their job. If only 12 out of 400 MPs got an 80% attendance in Parliament, well, what were the rest of them doing? And I think we can draw a leaf from Yusuf's life. I mean, I don't think he ever missed a portfolio committee meeting that he had to attend. And we never put out posters about, the level of political discipline. We didn't need an attendance register in those early days in Parliament. It was just the sheer commitment, the discipline that individual cadres and activists and public representatives, exercised. And I think Yusuf was a wonderful model in that regard. So for the younger MPs who are there, that's your work. The kind of community work he did through his parliamentary constituency office, the dedication, the openness, the accessibility, the willingness to reach out to different constituencies, to listen to sometimes just an ordinary pensioner's concerns and problems and say, help me to get my pension. That was the kind of politician that Yusuf was. And I don't see that, unfortunately, in so many of the public representatives today. I worked in the Lenasia Parliamentary Office for almost 14 years. We modeled ourselves on the way that Yusuf did his work in Pietermaritzburg. Today, if I look at the last 3, 4, 5 years, if you found an MP in the constituency office on a weekly basis, then that would be something to marvel at, because there was more absence than presence in the constituency office. So this is, I think, the challenge that we face. And if we want to draw a lesson from Yusuf's life, it's this kind of thing. Very practical issues of commitment, passion, discipline, and loyalty to the cause of the people. Samira's death, Sohefa and Samira's mummy's death. I know we were at the Cape Town airport that Friday, it was Friday, and I could see that Yusuf was just distraught when I walked into the lounge there, and the first thing came up to me and said, "Ismail, there's something terrible. I don't know what it is. I don't have all the information, but I really have to get back to Durban as soon as possible. Something has happened to Samira." But the look on his face, I will never, ever forget that. And as Sohefa said, I think after that, it took years. I think till the end, he could never come to terms with her death and the tragedy and the brutality of that death. Quite often, over the years when we would speak, so it was 2006, if I remember correctly, when she was murdered. Quite often, whenever I would phone him, I said, "Look, any update from the cops?" And I think 19 years later, there's no closure. There's no sense of who is the suspect or the suspects. There's no sense of whether this was politically motivated. Was it just an ordinary crime? In the complex where the surgery was, it's not an isolated place. This wasn't some kind of a surgery in some farming community. But the fact that the police service can't give you clear leads, couldn't get to a point where somebody could be arrested and convicted. I think it stayed with him, and I think it troubled him till the end. As Sohefa said, half of him was lost when Sabira left us. And he was living in Labovia Park in the parliamentary village. And all he told me was he then moved to the provincial legislature because I think the loneliness and the trauma of her loss and just being there for the family, they moved him back to KZN. He just came to me and said, Ismail, I've got the place here in Livoria Park where other MPs were staying, the parliamentary village. Here's the key. Everything in there is yours. Just give me the duvet because that was a gift that Sabah had given to me when I moved into Livoria Park. So I stayed there for about 2 years on and off. And when I finished up there, I collected all the things and then gave it over to Samira. I left it at the flat when she was in Joburg that time. But that was the kind of person Yusuf was. I mean, material things never mattered to him. I know that in 2021, we did this book on Thambi Naidu and his family and the struggle for non-racial South Africa. I was coming to Durban and I said, Yusuf, I wanted to do a book launch in Maritzburg. He said, fine, organize. You know, he booked the hall, he advertised it, got the sound system, set up the chairs almost alone. I think Roshan might remember that event. He even went to the point of, buying food. I thought there'll be some light refreshments, a cup of coffee or something. He got some kind of biryani made and he fed everybody. I felt totally embarrassed. This was at his cost. And in subsequent years, I mean, whenever we did another book, I told him, Yusuf, I'm coming to your house. Just send out, collect 3 orders. I don't want you to organize a launch because he wouldn't take a cent for the expenses that he incurred. I mean, that's the kind of generosity that Yusuf was. I want to go to Yusuf and Zuma and the support for Zuma. So I've read, I mean, all the various obituaries that people have written, but I think we have to confront this. So we were together at the Polokwane conference, where there was this, big factional division within the ANC between Mbeki supporters and Zuma supporters. Yusuf, of course, at that point in time was a Zuma loyalist. That whole KZN constituency and the delegates that came, I mean, they were marshaled, really marshaled. Nobody had access to them. The hotels were monitored. The place where they were staying on the campus was monitored. But he was totally, I mean, committed to Zuma. And when I asked him at the conference, that, I mean, really, what motivates you? I wasn't a voting delegate. I came as the Gauteng PEC as an additional member, so I didn't have voting status. And he said, have you ever worked with this guy? His humility, his simplicity, his accessibility, his ability to listen, the kind of peacemaking role. So I said, look, we were in Gauteng. We don't have the same kind of, intimate working organizational working relationship with him. We never had that opportunity. He says, this is the man for the future of this country. And so the night when the voting was completed, we were at now Ambassador Saad Kachelia's house. We were having supper there. He had invited a number of us. And then the phone call came saying they're going to be announcing the results anytime soon. I can tell you, I mean, all of us rushed out. We had to be at the university there to see what the announcements would be. And we had to park the car quite far from, because of the security situation, quite far from the campus. I have never seen a guy sprint like that. He outran me. I'm younger than him. He outran me, and I only discovered now that he was an exceptional sportsperson in his younger days. And of course, it was a phenomenal moment for those who supported Zuma. And then after the stories around the Gupta leaks and the various media reports and exposures on state capture came out, I had an opportunity of meeting him in Maritzburg and said, Yusuf, where are we now? A man was deeply distressed, disappointed. I mean, he almost went on to say that this is a betrayal of the revolution. What had happened under those 9 years of Zuma's rule. And we're not saying it's just one person, but the systemic nature of the corruption then, and the fact that it was allowed to fester and grow and permeate almost all aspects of governance at national, provincial, and local level. There was a deep sense of distress, disappointment in his air. But the beautiful thing was that he didn't lose his critical consciousness. He wasn't a fractional loyalist. He could see a problem. He was prepared to say, look, we made a mistake. And we didn't expect this. This man betrayed, and his supporters betrayed our revolution. But his loyalty to the ANC remained unchallenged, unmitigated. I mean, till the end, all of us have said, all of the speakers have indicated, right to the end, Yusuf worked, to rebuild the ANC. Whenever I pass by going to Durban, and in the last few years, I've had a good number of opportunities to get to Durban Central. I would obviously make a stop over in Maritzburg, meet with him, and if for some reason I couldn't, when I just come to Dr. Chota Mutala, the off-ramp, I'll phone him. Yusuf, how's it? I'm passing by. I'm going to be in Durban. Maybe when I come back, I'll try and touch base with you. And 2 weeks ago, I was going back to Durban because this time it was on the Saturday after his death. I couldn't talk to him. He was gone. And on the return trip, there was no one to phone. And then it really hit me what a loss this is. What a great comrade we have lost. This wasn't a microwave leader. This wasn't what I call a microwave public representative. He was a man who was schooled and steeled in over years in the liberation struggle. And he was really a people's leader, a person who was rooted on the ground, was a people's leader, and accessible and always available to all sorts of constituencies. I think from the time, if I can just say the concluding things, Alf, that from the time that Sabira, left him and us, he sort of turned to his inner self. And there was a kind of reawakening of his spirituality. Overtly, Yusuf we wouldn't think he was a religious person. So he's not dressed like me with a beard and a topi and kufta and all that. And he never, expressed a kind of sense of religiosity openly and advocated that. But I can tell you the guy was deeply religious, deeply spiritual. In his privacy, I think he made peace with his creator. And if I hear what Roshan has said, the fact that, in the Islamic tradition, if you die on a Friday, if your life is taken on a Friday, it's a very special occasion. It is a mark of acceptance of your service to humanity from the side of the creator. So from all of us, deep condolences to her family. And we've really lost a giant of a leader, although he never saw himself as a leader. And 2 years ago, when I was there, I told Suhaifa and others, I said, look, we need a biography, not just of Yusuf, but the Bhamjee family. And I appealed to them to get the photographs, to start collecting things. I hope that project will materialize. Thanks very much, Alf.
Comrade Ismail, thank you very, very much. You're just underlining what a powerful comrade Yusuf was. And we do have that responsibility to keep his values going. People, that brings to an end the speeches. We're going to go on to the open session now. And I'm going to request people to really, really keep it short. The first, if you don't mind, I will point to one or two people that can please make a short input. Pubi Govindsamy, if you are with us, can you please share your input very quickly with us? Thank you. Okay, it looks like Pubi is not part of the 100 people that managed to get in. If I can ask Karti Chetty to please make an input, if you're on, Karti.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about Yusuf's prowess in terms of sport. And as a scholar, Yusuf was a very fast athlete and also very good at cricket. both attributes which earned him national colors. But what I want to talk about is Yusuf was deeply committed and believed strongly in the power to drive social change through sport. And in my relationship with him, I was a player at the time of Young Natalians Football Club, a club that was chaired by Yusuf Bhamjee, who was regarded as Mr. Natalians, and Yusuf, after coming back from Ireland in 1983, decided to also play a meaningful role as a coach in the club. And I think as a member of Young Natalians, Yusuf was an avid supporter of SACOS, South African Council on Sport, and fully subscribed to the slogan, "No normal sport in an abnormal society." And that conveys the idea that sports is inextricably linked to social issues. Under SACOS, the club embraced the double standard resolution, and it was on the grand challenge of 1988, after we won the Easter tournament in 1989, our club made history by being the first team to walk out because of the contravention of the SACOS double standards resolution. And the rest is history. I wanted to share that, and lastly conclude just on the sporting bias in terms of use of personality. He had an infectious personality and energy, and players looked up to him as a community leader. And some of the highs that Yusuf achieved as a sportsman, he was instrumental in being the coordinator of Stop the Mike Getting Tour for 1990. And he was instrumental in playing a pivotal role in the formation of recognition of non-racial sports veteran association of people in Pietermaritzburg in particular who made a contribution to sport. And last but not least, he was afforded the Andrew Belangeni Green Jacket for his services as a sport activist in the province. So I wanted to share that aspect as being a secretary at that time and working with Yusuf both politically and in the community to share his sporting prowess, because I think everybody spoke in tributes about him, contributing to political and social issues, but he played an important part in the sporting arena. And I wanted to say that in terms of his legacy, he will always be remembered as a down-to-earth person and always as a backroom boy. He wasn't in the front line, and he was a brother's keeper, always serving others before himself and always having deep values of socialism. I thank you very much for granting me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kadri. Appreciate it. Anyone else want to share a memory or make a comment, please? Floor is open.
Has this hand up? Maybe you want to take Babu Beju and Krish.
Okay. Oh, I see that now. Go for it, Babu.
Thanks, Comrade Delph. I just want to spend a couple of minutes. I've been fortunate enough to know Yusuf for 62 years. We were in high school together, and we never thought that after high school we'll end up in Ireland together. I was fortunate to have been part of Yusuf's team in Ireland. We shared a flat for 4 or 5 years. And yes, he was a very good cook. I think he got his cooking skills in Ireland. He made a very mean meatloaf, and he also made very good masala eggs on Sundays. But Yusuf also was our political head in our household and in the South African Students Association. He played a major role in our political education. He also, would you believe it, he taught us self-defense. And also we started a newsletter that got us to read a lot in Ireland. My wife also joined us in Ireland in 1973. And what's amazing about this My wife took to him immediately. I'm a Hindu family, and Yusuf was Muslim. And amongst the Hindus, a sister would always tie this Rakhi string in August every year to show her love for her brother. And my wife Vijay offered to tie the string for him, and he accepted it. And since 1973, every time we were together, Vijay tied the string for him. We were very fortunate that in August 2024, I phoned him in the morning to say, Vijay would like to come home and tie the string for you. He said, no, look, I'm in town, so I would rather come to your house. And he did. He came and had lunch with us, and Vijay tied the string, not knowing that it would be for the last time. So we had a very good relationship with his family. My mom and I traveled to his wedding in Roshni. When my mom spent time with him in Ireland, she cooked all his favorites, not mine. So he was very charming. He was very, very good at getting to our mothers. So we had a very good relationship. And for that, I want to thank Yusuf. I was also the hardest time that I've had with Yusuf. I was at the hospital when Sabra was attacked. I think Umar Latif, Shabir Bhamjee, and I were the first three people that reached that hospital when we got the news. But it was very, very hard when Yusuf flew in from Cape Town, and he came in. He used to call me Brains. He said, "What has happened? What has happened?" And Sabra was still alive at the stage. And after he went in and he came out a few minutes later, she passed on. So she actually waited for him. So we've had some very close moments. And for that, Yusuf, you'll always be in my heart. And thank you very much for this opinion. Thank you for the guys that organized this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karuna and everybody
Thank
else
you, Babu.
for sharing ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Babu. Much appreciated. Hey, Krish, good to connect with you after so long. Go for it.
Hi, Alf. Really nice to see you as well. Thank you very much. Beiju just beat me to it because I wanted to bring the Irish component to it, and just to say that I happened to after metric go to Dublin, and in the 1970s, and there are many people on this call who've been in Dublin and many who couldn't join. And in Dublin, just a couple of things. The first of all, starting our political consciousness was, Yusuf and Sabera played a very important role by, providing literature, having a range of reading groups, having a range of political mentors that helped us to develop our own political understanding of things. And that really stayed with us for many, many years to come and really carved our paths over the next decades coming back home. So that was a very important contribution, and Yusuf was key and instrumental in setting that up. And all of the attributes that people have alluded to this evening really was completely confirmed by his humble leadership and style in Dublin. Of course, he was part of the South African Students Association and part of the soccer team and all of that. And also the house where they stayed, which was famously called 16, was a home for all of us South Africans to go to every weekend and spend time and have political discussions, share meals together, etc. So really experiencing Yusuf from that angle was really a very humbling experience, and I really want to pay tribute to him from that point of view. And I'm sure many of the comrades and friends who are on this, who've been in Ireland and Dublin, will endorse that. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Alf, and really deepest condolences to the Bhamjee family. Thank you.
Thanks, Krish. Much appreciated. Thank you for wanting to say something, Shireen. Please go for it.
Thanks very much, Alf. I think I want to speak specifically, very briefly, on behalf of my mum, Mrs. Choti, Rabia Mutala. I just want to say, the amount of care that Yusuf, Yunus, Babu, David have shown to my parents over the years as comrades, as community people, as elders, was really a privilege to watch. And for many years after my dad passed away, Yusuf and Yunus, Babu are always there to spend time with my mum, and keep her in touch with what is going on in terms of activism in the community, and in that deep condolences to the family, to the Bhamjee family, the daughters. the extended family. Yusuf was really a unique individual. He was dignified, eloquent, charming, and most recently, he spent a long time at my house in Pietermaritzburg when Lady Pandor visited, and there's some beautiful snapshots and videos of them together. So, I think Maritzburg epitomizes for me so much of what's good about the struggle in South Africa. It's always had a strong intergenerational mix. It had a very strong tradition of non-racialism. It had a very strong tradition of being non-secular. And all those things were epitomized in Yusuf's leadership. So we're very grateful for that. And I hope that with Yusuf's passing, those traditions that he so carefully built together with others, A.S. Chetty, Dr. Chetty, my father's very good friend, and others will continue. So thanks very much, Alf.
Thanks for that, Shireen. Much appreciated. Anyone else has a word or two to say? Okay, in that case, I'll call Karuna just to give her a minute because of her closeness and historical relationships with Yusuf and the family. Karuna?
Thank you, Alf. I just want to say that Shireen, it was really nice to hear all the points you raised. But I think there's a few more things that we need to say about Yusuf, and that is that, as soon as he came back from Ireland, he got involved in civic work and got the Allendale Ratepayers Association together. And, of course, that he always supported the working class struggles. And in 1985, he actually worked on the Samcol strike and, was really very instrumental in the consumer boycott to assist the Samcol workers. And, Suhaifa, your point about dad loving food is something I really remember because, for a person who didn't like to eat a lot of food, he took me to the university pub for lunch every day for the 2 years that I worked with him in the DSRG. And that's another point that a lot of us don't know about Yusuf. He was a very passionate researcher. He always wanted to write the Indian history, and he used to have long discussions about the first passive resistance campaign and wanted to interview a whole lot of the people in Pietermaritzburg. But in the DSRG, he always insisted, let's look at the businesses. Let's look at the Indian businesses where we come from, and let's write about them to show how well they do. So Yusuf always had that very interesting approach of being an all-rounder. The one thing that I remember very clearly is when we used to go to pick Sabera up from Edendale Hospital, Yusuf and I used to drive on a road just alongside the hospital, and we always said this is no man's land, and it used to be full of potholes, just like all the roads these days, whether we in Joburg or whether we in Pietermaritzburg, full of potholes. And I certainly hope that Yusuf actually sorted out that no man's land road and dealt with it. To the Bhamjee family, who are family friends, I think it's important that we continue the legacy that he started, and we're looking forward to ensuring that the next generation continues the work that Yusuf began to do. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Karuna. That was excellent. People, if you bear with us just for a minute or two, Abba is going to do a vote of thanks and then we'll close. Thank you. Abba, you can go for it.
Thanks, Alf. So on behalf of Siva, who unfortunately couldn't be in the group, because as you know, there's a limit on the number of people that could be admitted into the group, but he kindly agreed to step out so that at least one other person could join us. And we had a limit of 100 people. So on behalf of Siva, Alf, Karuna, thank you to each one of you for attending this memorial as we deepen our collective flags and in remembering a fallen hero. I'm not going to go into my personal experiences very limited and more recent. Our thanks go to the Bhamjee family for working with us in arranging this memorial. Sohaifa, I think your rendering of a beautiful life that was well lived was really touching and moving. Really appreciated all the personal memories you brought into this. Our thanks to each of the speakers, Lachizat Senoli, Ila Gandhi, Yunus Karim, Roshan Jainat, Ismail Wadi, and others. Our thanks to the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, especially Sean Bolton, for the technical support in providing this platform. Unfortunately, some of you may have heard that we couldn't stream it live for some reason, but it will be available on the Ahmed Kathrada YouTube channel. Thanks for Kaelan, Karim, for the lovely poster that you put together. As all the speakers have emphasized, let us pick up Yusuf's spear and continue fighting for a better South Africa and a better world. Thank you. Hamba Gashle, comrades, all the best.
Thank you, Abba. Much appreciated for that. I think you did say it. It's all our job to pay tribute to Yusuf through our actions, and hopefully we can all contribute towards creating a better society, as Abba says. People, thank you very much for participating, and I hope this was a fitting tribute to a great comrade. Thank you.
Good night.